Hello. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. I am Tanya Janka, and I wrote a book. Wait. It is called Alice and Bob Learn Application Security. And this is the final streaming session where we're going to talk about two chapters, continuous learning and final thoughts. So every month for 2021, well, we started in March or February or March, we went through one of these chapters and we discussed, and by we, I mean myself and other basically professionals in the field who I'm friends with, who I could convince to come on the stream with me for free. Why did I do these streams? Because I want this knowledge to exist and I want it to be free. You don't write a book that you to make money. To say if you think that that's a don't you get paid minimum wage. You write a book because you want that knowledge to be out there in the world and you want it to be accessible. And so I really care about application security. I really care about helping software developers make more secure code. I want to push our industry forward. And so I invited awesome guests of people who I respect quite a bit to come on the show. And one of those is my dear friend, Nikki Becker. Hi.
Hello, everyone. Hi, Tanya. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for coming back on the show.
Yeah.
Could you tell the audience a little bit about yourself that you're open to sharing?
Yeah, definitely. So, I have been doing this security thing for, I guess, over a decade now. Spanned all sorts of areas, mostly consulting, where you get to go into all different types of organizations and witness all of these other their security problems and help them solve it, to kind of security leadership and management, and everything in between. Did a little stint in government, and yeah, I sort of feel like it's a fun space to tackle, and you can go at it from the super technical level, which I was doing as a consultant, and you can go at it from like a policy level, which I tried to do in government. So a lot of different ways to kind of tackle the space. But yeah, that's a little bit about me. I do a lot in OWASP. Tanya and I initially started this project called the OWASP DevSecOps project. I think 4 years ago now, right? It was maybe even 5. I don't even remember that year.
I think 2018, maybe 2017.
Yeah, whenever we were in Ireland, right?
Yeah, and then New York shortly after.
Yeah,
it's a while ago.
Yeah, so I'm very active in the OWASP communities, running OWASP DevSecOps now with Nancy. We do a live stream every-ish week, kind of. Yeah, that's me. I mean, I could go into a lot of detail, but it's boring.
Nikki's done like every single job in InfoSec, basically, except maybe SOC analyst. Like, I think you've done literally, like, she's written policy, she's written government policy, she's done pen testing, she's done DevOps and DevSecOps, she's done CISO, she's done like just incident responding, malware forensic, like she's done all the things. And so she's a really good person to have on the show.
Well, that's nice of you. And, I think today's topic is around learning, right? So, this is like very apropos in the discussion, how to move around in the space, because you're going to need to learn.
Yes. So I don't know if you feel this way, Nikki, but one of the things that I like best about tech and that I really like best about InfoSec is that there's always some cool new thing I get to learn about where I'm like, oh man. And I view that as a plus, but not everyone is wanting to learn new stuff all the time. Or maybe they find it hard or difficult, or they're not sure how to do it. And so when I wrote this chapter called Continuous Learning, here we go. So if you have the book, it's page 207. If you don't have the book, don't worry, you totally don't need it to go along with us. We're not going to like go page by page. But I wanted to write this chapter basically like half for people that are employers to realize, like, when you invest in your employees, it makes them want to stay and work for you longer. Like when you send your employees on training. So I put like a bunch of like research and stuff into here to like prove my point. But basically, like, Nikki, how do you feel? Like if you work at a place and they never send you on training and they never invest in you, I don't know. It makes me feel.
I mean, in technology, that's a very bad sign, right? Like if you're not investing in your people to learn new technologies or new ideas around technology, it's probably a really bad sign in terms of their vision for what technology is. Yeah. I was thinking about this the other day. You think there's any jobs out there that really stay very stagnant, right? Like I overheard a conversation around a bunch of marketers and they were
Mhm.
talking about like the cookieless future, like how to do online marketing without relying on the cookie, right? And so that
Mhm.
field is changing because of all these new realities around tracking. I don't know. It just feels like every field has some technology dynamic dynamicity is a word, I don't know,
It
that
is not.
requires you to learn, right? Like I don't know, is there any field out there? Like even if you're a doctor, like you have to learn, right? There's like, people are
Mhm.
researching all sorts of stuff, right? That we don't know. So I think that's just like what comes with a career.
Yeah, I would say with tech, like only if you are one of those people who's working in in COBOL on a mainframe and you're like, I'm going to retire in the next 5 years and I'm just going to keep doing this COBOL stuff and like I'm just going to keep this job until I retire. That person probably doesn't need to learn stuff, but like everyone else probably does.
Yeah. But they're choosing that to like
Yeah.
kind of
Oh, yeah.
narrow down in that space. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do think
Like,
tech has a little bit of like a wilder version of this, right? Like, especially in security, like I've been in positions where I've been handed like an architecture diagram and they're like, oh, it's going to production in 3 weeks. You're cool with it, right? I'm like, I don't even know what this stuff is, right? Like, I'm totally not cool with it because I don't even understand it, right? I feel like maybe that's a little bit not true in other, like, I don't think medicine works like that, right? Like, people are not like,
mm.
I don't know what I'm doing. I have 3 weeks to figure it out. I don't know. I mean, maybe it does, but
And then I have
I
to do
think,
heart surgery. Ah, I hope this shit
yeah,
works out.
yeah. But I feel like we're presented with more dramatic kind of learning situations since we have to like skill up kind of quick and it sort of got like spurts, like in spurts you have to like kind of skill up. I could just be my experience and not how other people see it, but I think our space does lead to the developing a rapid learning skill is probably a really great career move.
Yes. I also feel like in InfoSec specifically, so like I'm super biased because I run SheHacksPurple, which is a training academy, but I started running SheHacksPurple because I just couldn't afford to go for the security training. And this isn't like a jab at my competitors. It's that like they can charge that much, so they do, right? And like as a dev trying to switch into security, and then later being, a junior AppSec person and a junior pen tester trying to learn, I found it very expensive and kind of out of reach for because I don't live in the United States, I live in Canada, and our dollar, the Canadian rupee, is worth a lot less than the American
Canadian.
dollar. And so like 1 million of our little rupees are worth, 2 or 3 American dollars. And so like when I would go to buy things in English, because I speak English and French, and like a lot of Americans speak English, like I would say almost all of them. And so like all the training that is in English, a lot of it comes out of America because there's way more Americans too than Canadians. And so I'd be looking at this and I'm just like, that's 10% of my income pre-tax. So that's 20% of my income for the year post-tax. I'm just like,
Yeah.
and like you really want it, but you can't have it. And when I was a dev, I found it more affordable. I found it more doable. I found more free stuff that was actually really, really good. Not that I'm saying that free stuff about InfoSec's all bad. I'm just saying like some of it is a little bit like some dude that's streaming for 4 hours. It's like, hey man, like click here and stuff. Let's see what happens. And I'm like, oh, I don't really have 4 hours to see you just randomly click on things.
Yeah. I think a lot of those price tags are driven to like the enterprise, right? Customer, right? Like
Mhm.
normal
Yeah.
people aren't spending $5,000 a course unless the company is paying for that. And I think the
Yeah.
business model assumes that a company is paying for it, not an individual, which presents a really good opportunity for trainings like yourself, to be a thing, right? Consumable
Yeah,
by more, I mean, enterprises as well as more accessible, making it more accessible.
for sure. But like, so part of the thing I say in the book is like, why isn't university teaching this? Not that I want to immediately put myself out of business, but you sort of do when you work in security, right? You sort of, like, it sounds weird, but you sort of want to put yourself out of business. Like ideally, like you want to have everyone know the thing. And so, I mean, you are you still doing the professorship, or you were?
Yeah, I've done a lot of teaching at universities, and I think if I could, again, my own experience answer that question, it is a lot of work to do course development. And, if you're an instructor and you're teaching an AppSec course or introduction to networking security or, I don't know, security architecture, every 5 years, you probably have to throw the whole thing out. I mean, maybe networking, you can kind of still, some of those concepts really stick around, right? Like TCP and UDP, we're still in those worlds, right? But then you bring in the newer stuff, right? Like, how does Kubernetes networking work? Is that a thing that I should know? Or SDN, right? And cloud native kind of networking realities. And the instructor has to do that, right? And I think there's, it's a lot of work to do that. So, the textbooks don't exist. So you then have to like do everything, which is like create all the reading content and the lab content and then deliver it all. And these people might have full-time jobs and, I don't know. That's as an adjunct, that's my experience.
Yeah, and it's not like it pays tons and tons of cash like it could if you instead were working full time, like working those number of hours in InfoSec at a job. It's not the same from what I understand.
Yeah, it is definitely not the same. Yeah, but it is fun. It is fun to teach. And so if you want, to keep your students on the edge of like what's going on in the space, you'll go that extra mile to make sure that they're aware, or send them some good blog posts, or point them in a direction of like, hey, maybe we can't lab on this, but you should know this is coming, right? And but it is hard, and I think there is truly a gap in the educational system around being able to rapidly develop more modern content around a thing. And I think again, this could be an unpopular opinion, but I think some of the cloud providers are trying to solve those gaps a little bit by like convincing you. I mean, obviously they want you to use their cloud products, right?
Yeah.
So it is somewhat of a marketing vehicle. But they do, let these labs be free for educators and things like that. So I think they do close the gaps like a little bit. And so if you're like looking and get like skilled up on how the clouds, how any one of the big 3 or 4 clouds work, you can just go poke around, and there's a bunch of labs out there that you can do.
I want to like take hats off to all the cloud providers for doing that, because when you buy a great big SaaS product or a great big DAST product, you have to pay extra for training on how to use that security tool you just bought. And like you'll pay professional services to install it if it's really hard to install, because some of them are like not easy to install. And then on top of that, you're like paying for training on how to use the tool. So the fact that the cloud providers are like, yeah, we're going to teach you for free how to be awesome and secure in our cloud. Like, I think that I know that like it does benefit marketing, but like, I don't care. That's awesome.
Yeah, it is. And they have like well-architected labs, and, even their conferences that they do every year or every twice a year, I think, like, I don't know, reInvent just happened last week or 2 weeks ago or something. And then there's Reinforce.
It looked fun.
Yeah. But they, these things are all like, you can watch all this content for free. It's all streamable. You could go obviously and pay an admission price, but you could also like most of it's like pretty free, and all their labs and well-architected labs and best practices labs are all out there. So I think they do fill a little bit of a gap. I've definitely relied on cloud labs to like help reinforce a concept of,
Well, and like really good documentation. Like at first when I started in the cloud, I'm like, oh my gosh, this doesn't explain how to do anything. And now it's getting really good, where you can look up how to do even like almost like edge cases. Like I want to integrate this with this and then this. And it's like, there'll actually be articles to help you. Sometimes it's blog posts from third parties, but I find the providers are getting really good. Ooh, we have comments from Kellen in the chat. I keep coming back to the economics of security. How can we make it cheaper and used more often, both in terms of money and ease of use? And I'm assuming he also means like when he says ease of use, like people understanding how to use these products, and then also like when to use them and how to use them effectively.
Yeah, that's the $1 million question.
Like I would say it's actually 100 or what is it? I did a thing, and because I had to present to some investors, and I can't remember how much. It was like a $200 billion industry per year in 2020 for InfoSec. So it's a $200 billion
I
question.
mean, the whole thing, not just education. Yeah.
Oh wait, it was 2
yeah.
billion. It was 2 billion. Yeah. 2 billion for the whole thing and 150 million in 2020 for the education portion.
Oh, wow.
So that is a $2 billion question, Kellen. Like, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I guess there's obviously, a few obvious things, which is user experience, right? Like in more consumer driven product, there's a strong focus on user experience, right? Do people intuitively know how to like hail an Uber ride from my phone? And there's a lot of research that goes into making this frictionless. I'm not sure that that's the highest priority item for security vendors, and probably for good reason, right? They're focused on other things, and the UX might suffer. And I think that could create an environment in which people are uncertain about how to operate this thing securely. So maybe like stuff like that could improve. But again, there's a cost to doing that. And yeah, there's a whole incentive model that probably needs, consistent tweaking to make work. So I don't have a good answer for Kellen's question, though.
No, I don't have a good answer either. But if I did, I would probably have more money than I have now.
Yeah. We would have a lot more money than we do now. I agree.
So a thing that I talk about in the book, and a thing that I have a feeling that you might agree with me, but it's totally cool if you don't. That's why I invited you on. I feel like for some reason in InfoSec, the super hot topic is like hacking and offensive security. And even more like edge cases, like people talk a lot about chaos engineering, but like almost no one actually does it in production. Like I see a lot of like cool training on how to hack the planet, but like there's way more jobs doing blue team, and there's way more jobs, like there's a lot of jobs doing AppSec versus pen testing. And like I'm confused as to why there's like way more content and training about like hack the planet. Do you see that, or is it just in my head?
No, I think it's not. I mean, I think it's fairly obvious, at least to me. I guess it just gets this like sexy billing, right? It gets dramatized in Hollywood, and it gets dramatized in storytelling around even real life situations. Like, there's a lot of excitement in the perpetrator of an incident, right? The hacker, or the bad guy, or the good guy that comes in and kind of saves the day. There's a lot of drama there, and people are kind of just humans, just are totally attracted to that, right? We want to be like that hero that like hacked the planet and saved the planet. And yeah, but it's kind of funny. Like when I was pen testing for years, you sort of get to this place where you're writing up the same stuff over and over again. And yeah, maybe once every couple of engagements, you find something super cool and you're like, this is a really great finding. Can't wait to write it up. But it's not that often. Generally, you're writing up more of the same kind of, hey, you have a, cross-site scripting issue here. You have this issue there. And then they don't get fixed, or, you're having the trouble that I had would be like, you have all these reports written and you feel like, okay, they're going to take this. They're going to be like, yes, now I'm going to fix it all, right? And then you quickly learn that that's not how this operates. That's not how this works, right? And you sort of feel like, all right, how do we solve this problem at scale? Because we can't just pen test our way out of this, right? Like we don't have enough humans on the planet to do that, And so then you kind of get into like one layer deeper, like what does it take to like actually affect change? And chasing pen testing type risk, I feel like maybe unpopularly is not the way that we're going to scale security.
Yeah, I'm working. So I have like a contract with a client right now, and we're trying to shift security left. So start security earlier in the system development lifecycle. And I'm like, I want to scan every single time you check something in. And then I'm going to send you a little email that says, hey, what you checked in was scary. Or I won't send you an email, which means good job. And then when you get to the pipeline, if you still have the scary, I'm going to be like, bad, go back. I already told you. And then, at the end, if we do get to do a full pen test of the app at some point and that's still there, like there's going to be discussions, right?
Yeah.
And I don't want to find it in the pen test. I want to find it earlier and before. And the devs are like really excited about it. They're like, oh my gosh, finally, just tell us the answer. Just tell, like, they're like, why are you waiting? Like, you know how a teacher will teach stuff and then at the end they give you a test? They're like, that's what the pen test feels like. They're like, why can't you just tell us as soon as you know? Why can't you help us right away? So when the exam comes, we're like, boom, got that.
Yeah, no, it's so obvious. I mean, it's so reasonable and rational, right? And I think moving to like secure by default environments, or even the cloud providers, I think could play a big role here, right? Creating a secure by default cloud environment, right? I mean, there's a lot of opportunity there to like take the decision making or some of the security decision making away from the customer. And I mean, I think it happened with email in some way, right? Like people don't host their own exchange service. I mean, generally they don't. Most of them don't. Some people do, or they use Microsoft, Google. I don't know who else provides email. Other people do, but those are probably the big ones, right? And it takes that issue away from the customer. I mean, they have to worry about other things, configuring accounts, password requirements, levels of authentication. There's a lot of other things to worry about, but you sort of remove some of the security decision making and offload it to maybe a cloud provider, and you can get to a more secure by default environment in which, I don't know, maybe less bad things happen or less security decisions have to get made by the customer. But again, so many different things could happen that could totally explode everything I just said. But that's kind of loosely where I feel there's opportunity.
That's cool. So in this chapter, I list a zillion different ways that people can learn. I list activities you can do on your own, activities you could do for your staff, activities you could do for yourself. But what I was thinking is we could go through like you and me, Nikki, could go through the questions at the end of the book or the end of the chapter. But I was hoping that the audience, so there's a couple of you watching, I was wondering if some of you could answer some of these questions too. Because Nikki and I can give you examples of things we want to do this year for learning. But I was hoping that all of you would share ideas either that you've done in the past or that you are thinking you might want to do. Because that, it sounds weird, but you sharing a thing you're going to do, people might not have thought of that. And they're like, oh, damn, I'm going to do that. And I personally feel that when I talk to other people about like how they learn or what's their favorite thing, sometimes it's a thing I've never thought of. And it's that perfect thing for me, if that makes sense. And so this book, like this year, like which books do you want to read? So I'm actually like, I'm just going to grab a book I'm reading right now, if that's cool. And Nikki, like what books do you want to read or have you read recently that were awesome?
Yeah, no, these are great questions. I mean, I have like probably 800 books that I want to read. And if I could like read faster, I could get through them faster. Yeah, it's a hard problem reading books because there's just so many good books out there. But I try to mix it up, right? There's like the technical books, which sometimes I just don't like reading super technical books because I feel like I need some sort of application to like reinforce it. So I try to pick like books that'll help me think differently or like communicate better. There's a really good book that I just started reading called Surrounded by Idiots. I mean, it's not necessarily an InfoSec book, but it has ways of communicating your objectives to others so that they're well understood and well received. I think that's a tremendous problem in InfoSec, right? We speak this language. We have to communicate this language to others who don't speak this language and not make them feel like they should speak this language. And, there's so it's a really good book on just improving communication. And I'm learning a lot from it. So that is like a current read right now. But in my own technical journey, I sort of know like very little about like machine learning and AI, that whole space. And I kind of want to learn more about it just from a technical, like it's cool, right? Like who doesn't want to understand how this stuff works, right? This could be all of our problems one day, or it already is all of our problems, right? And so it's like an area that I just don't really understand well. So No Starch has a bunch of good books on this subject. So I have them, on a shelf and I'm going to get to them. Well, on an iPad shelf.
I actually just let my significant other into my Audible account because so I have like 500 sci-fi books in there, but I also have, so like we were talking about it. And so my sweetheart's like, so I knew that you were kind and that was important to you, and performing good in the world was important to you. But then when I read your list of books, it's like how to run your company in a way that doesn't hurt the environment, how to run your company in a way so that you perform good, and it's like over and over, just like sprinkled, oh, how to make sure that like your policies aren't racist, and it was like we were talking about over dinner last night, such a reinforcement of who you are, like looking through your books, and then 5 zillion tech books, like DevOps, and then sci-fi, space, sci-fi. Yeah. But this book, I'm reading this book right now. So this is written by a bunch of Google employees, which you can see there, but building secure and reliable systems. So reliability, in my opinion, is like a really big part of security because it's the A in CIA, right? But like the way that they tell the stories of how Google found these answers, I have found super enlightening. And I'm only like a couple chapters in, like maybe 20% of the book. But there's some things where it's like, oh my gosh, I've always known about that. I didn't know what it was called. Or like there's a concept, not multi-factor, but multi-party authentication. So needing to have more than one person to authenticate something. And I've done this before with like bank accounts, right? Like if you're going to if you share a bank account with your significant other, probably don't want to spend more than $10,000 without talking about it first, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or with businesses. But I'm like, oh my gosh, I could do that with all my tech too. Like it just didn't occur to me. I'm like, oh, that's so cool. And so, yeah, I find that I really like stories in the books. And so this has a lot of stories of like, this is a thing that happened at Google and it resulted in this incident. And then we did analysis of how that happened. And then here's how we fixed it so it never happens again. I'm like, yes, this is the best. So that's a book I'm working through.
Yeah, that sounds like a great book.
I know it says O'Reilly, but it's like clearly like it's all Google employees that wrote it. So it's team effort.
Yeah. Like when you learn or when you read a book, like, do you take notes? Do you like highlight it? Or do you have like a way of like making sure you pull the big ideas out and get them in there?
Post-it notes and highlights for sure. And then if there's certain specific things, sometimes, I have this giant folder of potential blog posts someday. And so sometimes what I'll do is I'll take like something from a book and then I'll be like, I got this idea from this book, but here's like all these other situations like I feel it could apply to that might be cool. Like when I first heard of assume breach, I could only think of 1 or 2 ways that it applied. And so then over time, I've been like teaching that as a concept in one of my courses, like over and over again, talking to company after company. And then each company has a different way that they can apply that. I'm like, oh, your business model does this. What if you do that? And so the more examples I feel that we can give people of each one of these concepts helps them grow. And so, yeah, I'll kind of take it out. And so I just have I have enough blog posts started for the rest of my life. Yeah. But that's how I learn. It sounds weird. So like one of the ways in the book that I'll learn something really well is I will write a blog post about it. So I'll go and I'll do the thing and I'll be like, oh, that was broken. And I throw it away and I start. And then eventually I'm like, now I'm going to write up. And it's like, here's where I went wrong. Here's where you could avoid that and all of that. And then when I'm done the blog post, I'm like, okay, now I know it.
Yeah, I think writing is like the best way to reinforce anything. Isn't that like just like been studied and conclusively right? That's like the way. It works for me too. Because once you're writing something, you're like, do I actually understand what I'm doing? And then you're like, wait, that doesn't even make sense as a sentence. I don't understand this. And you have to go back and figure out like exactly where your thinking went wrong or
A thing I do when I do my conference talks. So I figured out that if I put a lot of text on the screen, everyone turns off their ears and they just read it. Right. And I was like, okay, I don't want that. So what I started doing is I just put pictures from the women of color tech chat. But so it's like a bunch of women of color just being awesome in like various technical backgrounds, like just like updating databases and writing code and stuff. And so I'll tell them the thing and I'll just keep going through a few slides and then I'll be like, I wrote notes for you take a picture of this slide. And it's like a summary of what I just said. And I've had a lot of people be like, ooh, that's helpful. Because I don't know about you, but like, you know, sometimes conferences, they'll give you a notebook and I'm like in it. But sometimes you just want to watch and absorb. And later I'm like, oh, I should have taken notes. I'm like, I'll watch it again later. I don't have time. I almost never actually do it. It's rare.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I try to like take notes like in my head and then write them down at the end, but sometimes I miss things. It's a hard problem to you just write it down when you have it. I always carry around like a little field notes with this tiny little space pen because it's so small. And you know, it fits like in your pocket, and then it's just like always there. So I feel like if I always have something to write with, I'll write it down. But if you don't, sometimes you're like firing up the notes app, and you're like, you know, where's the notes? You know, I need to write it with my hands. I can't just punch it out on my phone.
Yeah, it's not the same. No, and punching it out on your phone just sucks. Like I'm like, and I'm like, why do you? Yeah. Anyway, I used to type also, and it would always put ashtray. I'm like, I have never typed the word ashtray, and like, what? So there's a comment from Gary. So hi, Gary. Thanks for coming. So there's a lot to be said about the idea you don't understand a concept deeply until you have tried to explain it to others. And I can't agree more. Like, that's awesome. Yeah. I basically, yeah, it's like he summarized everything we just said.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's true for anything, for everything, ever. Like your feelings, your, you know, comprehension of a book, your comprehension of anything is true. Just explain it to others and you'll realize how well or not well you understood that.
Okay, so I have a new question. Will you attend a conference this year? Or you could say one from last year, but name one that you want to go to. Now, I know right now there's a pandemic and everything's weird, but virtually attending totally counts. Like, I just got accepted to RSA.
Cool.
And I have a lot of people in San Francisco I haven't seen in 2 years. So assuming it's still safe by the time February rolls around, I'm going to go to that and give hugs if that is appropriate, with a mask on, to be clear. But
or
what
elbow.
Yeah.
Elbow. I have always wanted to go to the Chaos Computer Club conference in Germany, and it's like around late December. I've never made it, but I've always wanted to go. So I was planning on going in 2020, but you know, everyone was planning on a lot of things in 2020. But they do have a remote option, and it's like free. You can go register, and it's soon. Like it's like in 2 weeks or 3 weeks. So you can kind of go to that. I'm gonna, you know, kind of. You watch YouTube videos, but it's still, or streaming service videos, but it's still going remotely.
Yeah.
And I hope one day to go. I kind of like these like hackery conferences where it's more about like tinkering with technology, you know, than necessarily kind of like listening, you know, kind of talking more about implementation of security programs. I mean, that's cool too, but that's like my day job, right? I'd rather like, you know, they had a talk, I think a couple of years ago on like how the Apollo computing, the AGC, Apollo Guidance Computer, like the thing that got you know, us to the moon, worked and how it was architected and like stuff like that. Like that's what I'm here to go to conferences for. You know, I want to hear more about how that worked because I know it doesn't really have a lot of relevance to, you know, your day jobs, but it's super fascinating. So Chaos does a lot of good talks like that. So I've always wanted to go. Hopefully 2022.
Yeah, seriously, that would be awesome. I had a friend that went to that and they were like, it was the best thing that's ever happened. So that seems like a pretty good recommendation.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I hope that maybe next year, like, you know, whether, I guess it's too early to make predictions. I have no idea, like, if anyone's going to do a conference next year. I mean, maybe a week ago I would have been like, yeah, but then now I have no idea.
But yeah, the new strain comes out, everyone's screwed again. It's like, I don't know.
But I hope that the OWASP conferences come back. I hope that we can go to RSA, or, you know, that we could go to, I don't know. Remember we used to go to so many conferences?
Yes. I miss the OWASP conferences because it's sort of, I was explaining to my significant other, I'm like, when I go to a conference, it's sort of like summer camp, but for adults, and there's alcohol and you can learn stuff. And there's all these professionals that you know that you haven't seen in like a year. and you get to hang out with them, and then like brilliant people teach you cool things. And yeah, the response was, oh, we should go together. That sounds cool. Except for my significant other doesn't work in tech. So it's like, well, you might find certain parts of it very boring.
Or not.
Yeah, or not. Like I went to Sector last month, which is the biggest security conference in Canada. And they sold 1,500 tickets and like 200 people showed up live, which really sucks. Yeah. And so for my talk, there were 68 people, which was amazing because every other talk had like 5. Like I went to see this guy named Solomon Sanya, who I've seen speak a bunch of times. He's really awesome. Like he gave an amazing talk and there was 6 people. And I'm like, what are you all doing not being here? And so then I messed up and I missed this talk. So Nikki, I think that you would be really excited by this talk. So this dude named Alex Dow, who's from Vancouver, he gave a talk about how to attack a DevOps tool chain, like how to attack Jenkins, how to use like all of those tools, because you know how a lot of them call out to SaaS products, and like basically how to attack those, find those holes, get in and attack your actual pipeline. And I was like, oh my gosh, you're dangerous, Alex.
Like solar wind style.
Yeah, it was really, really cool talk. And he's like, yeah, there were 7 people there. And so he actually gave me and my camera guy, who I dragged with me, the talk in the lobby. It was so awesome. I'm like, so I'm the most lucky person at all of Sector to have like a talk one-on-one, basically. And I was just like, this is incredible. There should be thousands of people at this, right?
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, the pandemic's weird.
I know. I guess maybe there was a lot of people remotely watching it, or was it streamed live? Maybe.
Yeah. So then so it was weird. We all had to record a talk that got streamed, and then we all had to give our talk live as well. And so my streaming talk had way, way, way more people attending. But being there in person was really cool. I got to see a lot of the GoSecure team. So like in Canada, in Quebec, there's this company called GoSecure, and just basically a ton of Canada's researchers all work for GoSecure. And so I got to hang out with a bunch of them, and it was like, oh my God, we're in the same room. What's happening? Hi, let's eat poutine.
Poutine.
Yeah, they're all French Canadian.
Yeah. No, I know all about poutine.
Beneficially French Canadian.
Yeah.
It was
well,
awesome.
That's great. I'm glad you got that experience. Like, yeah.
But hopefully, I want more people to have it.
Yeah. No, same here. And hopefully we all get more opportunities to have it in 2022.
Ooh, look at Kelvin's comment. Attackers seem to be pushing left too. Oh my gosh, a truer thing has never been said, Kelvin, and it's terrifying.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
I have more questions, obviously, because that's what I do. So like, will you join, or are you part of a professional organization or professional community? So I think
I guess
both OWASP members.
Yeah, OWASP members, yeah. There's a bunch of I live in New York City. There's some New York City meetups that they're slowly figuring out a new model of outdoor meetups over the summer, and maybe I don't know what's going to happen, but yeah, I mean, there's a good community in New York City that I try to go to those meetups. But I think that's I used to go through these phases where I would go to like all the meetups and like learn all the things. And I was kind of like burning out a little, so I had to like take a step back and like kind of pick and choose. Like, all right, like just go to these 4. Don't do any more. You can't do any more. So I think I'm good with my professional organizations now. But of course, if new things pop up, I'm totally excited about it. So, and thankfully New York has a lot of this stuff going on. So yeah.
Audience members, what about you? So, I mean, I'm OWASP's biggest fan. So, Nicole won a WASPy before, and I won a WASPy this year. And they stopped doing the WASPy awards after Nikki won hers. And I was like, I'm never in my life going to have a chance to win this award, because being recognized by your favorite community is like pretty awesome, right? Like when you won the award, I was like so excited for you, because it's like your peers are all saying like, this chick rocks.
Yeah, no, it's great. I'm glad you got yours. I hope it's the glass thing, like a little glass. Yeah. Oh, there it is. Yeah. Mine was a slightly different glass cut, but yeah. Similar.
It's plastic, which is probably good because I have a glass one from DevSecCon, the one that's like right over my shoulder there. And like, it's like a weapon. It's really heavy. And like, I was joking, the kids were talking about like, if someone broke into our house, what we would do. And I'm like, I'll go get my award and I'll defend you with it like a sword. They're both laughing and they're like, Tanya's going to defend us with her awards. I'm like, I'll throw them at their heads. They're very heavy.
Yeah, it would work.
Yeah.
But you don't have crime up in Canada, so you don't have to worry about that.
Sometimes we do. Sometimes we do.
It's like an American joke, I think. That Canadians don't have crime, but
we have like some. Okay, so we have a comment from Gary. I did join OWASP earlier in the year, but haven't really got involved. Not liking people can be a milestone. Gary, you like other humans. I've seen you being like the funny guy that's super friendly. You like humans.
Yeah, and you don't even have to like necessarily like people. You just go and, you know, you have your own reasons for being there. You could get away with going to OWASP events without necessarily having to talk to a lot of people.
Yeah. So I still invite the audience to tell us other ways you want to learn, because there's a ton of ways. Like there's podcasts. I personally will like I'll put like a YouTube conference talk on my phone if I have to drive somewhere. And I'll just listen to it in my, like I have like wireless headphones or whatever. And I'll just listen to it as I'm driving, because sitting still is hard for me. Like watching the conference talk, like unless there's a demo, most of the time, like listening is enough. And then I can go back to the part that I want to see if I have to. But I find like that's a thing that works for me. But put stuff in the chat if you want to share ways that you learn or things that you learn from. Like I learned from Twitter, Nikki, this week. Basically, so a malware ransomware group put pictures. So they attacked a company and they put pictures of the internal Slack channels of like them spying and living on the network of that company, of them trying to respond to it. And they're like, haha, we're watching you respond, which is quite a flex. I'm not going to comment on that, but so this might sound dumb, but I'd never thought of that because I am an AppSec incident responder. So when someone's attacking, they're not like my stuff, they're attacking my app. And so they're generally not living on the network. That's not what you want me to investigate. It's like, I'm seeing, you know, like my API's crying and falling down. What's happening? Or like I'm seeing my, you know, my app keeps sending me these errors. The errors are too fast. There's a bot or there's some sort of script attacking us or something. And so I wouldn't look, I wouldn't think to be concerned about talking to my colleagues on the internal Teams or Slack channel, right? Like that wouldn't be a thing I would worry about. Like maybe I need to. Do you know what I mean? Like maybe they've attacked my database and maybe they've gotten onto my network. And so just me seeing that and then people were like laughing at the internal security team. And I'm like, laughing at us doesn't help us learn lessons, you know, it just makes us feel bad.
It's all funny until they're in that position. So they're just Twitter trolls at that point. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, of course. I mean, it's a very interesting
but
discovery.
I learned from that. Does that make sense? And like as a person that just does like software sorts of analysis, I was just like, oh, that never even occurred to me that I would have to hide my communications from our regular network just in case they got onto our network since then. Because none of the incidents I've done, they've ever been on our network. Or it's someone else on the security team who does have that background they don't need me because there's no apps involved. Comment from Gary. I find that learning has become harder just because there's so much material out there now. Gary, I totally agree. So the problem has moved from finding material to filtering it down to the good stuff that's right for you. Totally agree.
And I think with that, right, like you got to get good at filtering out noise or just learn what you think is noise and isn't helpful to you and kind of get rid of that. And then one of the things that I do that I think helps is I need like a hands-on application of a technical thing in order to like actually understand it. If I just read it, I'm like, okay, like
Yeah.
I read the words, but I don't really like fully like understand it. So I just try to like end a learning journey with, can I build something? Can I write something? Can I demonstrate like a POC of something to like actually prove to myself that I really understand it? And then I'm like, okay, I have exhausted this topic for myself for now, and I'm going to move on to something else. So I don't just like, because you can keep going even after that, right? There's like plenty of places to go. And so that's how I try to filter out like the too much material problem, because yeah, there is a lot of material every day. There's like, you know, 4 hours of live streaming you can watch, or joining a Discord channel, or going on Twitter, or and then you're like, wait, this
I
industry is
got no book
overwhelming.
done.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So I was hoping we could talk about the final chapter now. Oh, there's a comment from Kellen. It's fun to balance what your org needs with what you find interesting. Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree. So the final chapter is about how do you know when you've done enough? Like it's closing thoughts, but basically, so I'm like, security is everybody's job. We can't do it without the devs. Like we need to get every single person in the org on. But basically, there's 5 key questions that I was hoping we could go over, because the whole last chapter is just answering those 5 questions, in my opinion, but I want everyone's opinion. So the whole book is about how can we create secure software? How can we make sure that the software created is secure? And how can we make sure that from now on, we only create secure software? And so like the biggest question I always get is, when have you done enough? And like, this question's hard. Like, how do
Yeah.
you know, Nikki? How do you decide?
You mean like, when have you done enough to like close down the attack surface to a reasonable place where you feel confident in your app? Or is that what we're talking about here? Or more like learning? When have you
Oh, not
learned
about
enough?
learning, but about, so like when I became a pen tester, so I was a junior pen tester and then I switched to AppSec because it turns
Mm-hmm.
out that was right for me. And I remember asking my mentor, how do I know when I've done enough? And he's like, oh, well, when your hours run out for your
Yeah.
contract. And I'm like, well, if you're a full-time employee, your hours don't run out, right? Like, how do I know when I've done enough AppSec to this app and I need to do the next app? Or how do I know when I've done enough with the SaaS tool and I can go to the DAS tool? How do I know when? And
Yeah.
I have answers, but I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on any of that.
Yeah. So, in the pen testing world, I used to like in my head, like, have I found something really good, And like, is it good? And like, am I excited about this finding? Right.
Mhm.
And so and it's not really a metric, it's a feeling, right? And so it's a little hard to quantify, but in my heart, I'd be like, oh, this is a good finding. I feel really good about this one, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm out of hours, I have a good finding, I feel like, or several good findings, I feel like this is enough. um I guess like you want to make sure you're not phoning it in, right? And like taking shortcuts and like not really finding anything, because it's like that's a nightmare for a pen tester, an empty report. Like I cannot have an empty report, right? And I can't fill it up with like TLS weaknesses either. Like I gotta like find something good. I mean, not that that's not good. There could be very good reasons why you want to fill up a report on weaknesses in TLS, but finding something good. So I would kind of go after that. Like, how do I find real risk and real value? Like, how would this app get attacked? Like, what is really important here that we should be protecting, or I should help them protect? And kind of going at it from that, really, did I add value? And then I'd
Mhm.
say, okay, I've done enough. I've added value here. But again, that's not a quantifiable to feeling. But that's how I
Yeah.
would think about it.
Yeah. So like I do consulting with lots of different clients. And so a question I get asked like 25 times a day is, so we want to mature our program. What tool do we buy next? So
Yeah.
this is the most common question. And I'll say to them, so have you given secure coding training to all your devs? And is there a secure coding standard that they know they need to follow? And they're like, no, we need tools. And I'm like, you have SAS, DAST, SCA. That's good. And they're like, should we get IASP or should we get RASP? And I'm like, are you making sure that every single app gets security attention? and then it gets the same security attention. Like, I'm like, do you have security requirements for APIs? And they're like, no, we want to buy a thing that will make us secure. I'm like, oh.
There's a good quote here. Bruce Schneier said it. Security is a process, not a product. Yeah, it's a good one. I've used it. I think it's the lead into like one of his books. I think it might be Applied Cryptography. It's like one of the beginning. I don't know. I could have it wrong, but it's definitely his quote. Definitely his quote. And it's a great. Best. And you say it. I use it all the time. Like, you can't buy your way out of this. Like, it's a process, right? You know, it's just like diet and exercise. You can't really buy your way out of diet and exercise. You actually have to do it, right? And people are generally resistant to process because you have to do something. Whereas buying something, you don't really have to do much, and you kind of offload accountability to the thing you bought. Like, oh, that thing didn't work. Oh, that thing didn't work, right? Instead of like being like, well, I didn't actually get up and move.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
It's a practice. It's like yoga. It's a practice. You don't stretch once in January, and then in November, December, you're like, why am I so stiff? I did that yoga class in January.
Yeah.
Right. And like, there's people, they like want to buy a gym membership and then they'll be thin and fit. And it's like, no, you actually need to exercise, and you actually don't necessarily like, I actually really like going to the gym. Like, I find it motivating and stuff, but not everyone does. But you don't need to go to the gym to be fit. Ooh, Gary has a comment. So as a client of pen tests, I look at it from the other side. I'd only be happy when the stuff the professional pen tester can find isn't the glaring, obvious stuff non-experts should be able to discover. So Gary, this literally brings me to my next point. So I always tell people, like, so what is your risk appetite, and what are you protecting? So like, are you protecting data that's not sensitive, and like, you don't have credit card numbers, you don't have financials, like you don't whatever. And it's like, well, we want to make sure that like 14-year-olds can't just like walk in, right? Like, we want to make sure that we can defend against unadvanced attackers. But do you need to defend against nation states? No, you don't. Like, if China would like to have your data, they're going to have it. And do you want to spend like an extra couple $1 million protecting this data that's not sensitive, that's not actually really that important? Does that make sense? Does that seem like a good business investment? Probably not. And also, do you think China wants your data? China probably doesn't give a crap about you. Sorry, no offense, but you're probably not that important. If you have the focus of a nation state with an advanced cybersecurity posture, like China, like Russia, like Ukraine, like where they really know what they're doing, you need to take things more seriously. But chances are, if you're just like some little private enterprise that, like, I don't know, like mine, that gives security training, right? Like, there's no super secret sensitive things that we SheHacksPurple do. There's no super end of the world stuff that you could find from us. So we do this level of security versus if you're a government, you need to do that level of security. If you're part of the government doing anti-terrorism things, you need to do that level of security, etc.
Totally. And this is where threat modeling becomes a good place of developing like a relative benchmark, right? Like, based on this threat, based on that threat, and what is a likely threat for us? What do we care about as a business? What is our, if we lost all of our user data, is that going to kill our business? Is a problem? Yeah. So therefore, that's a big threat, and we should model these threats, right? And there's a lot of, threat modeling is a whole learning, but it's a good thing to learn. And I guess since we're talking a lot about learning, like those some of the more boring topics. I mean, I don't even think threat modeling is boring, but I think maybe people perceive it as not as exciting as like, front facing offensive security red teaming. But you can learn so much about how to talk about risk by learning how to threat model systems and how to communicate, like, likelihoods and risk, and, just developing a language of what that means. So, yeah. And I think, again, like value, right? When you've done this, as you gain more experience in your career, what adds value. We always will know. We know when we're phoning it in or taking a shortcut. It's really about like kind of committing to always like add value, right? If that's the one thing you could do in the space, like if you're a pen tester, like find a way to add value, and don't just like kick the tires on some vulnerability kind of scanner and just say, here's your pen test report, right? Like, I don't know. Yeah.
Yep. We have another comment from Gary. An analog here is to things like reliability, scalability, etc. But the advantage there is that they have a quantifiable SLA or response times, right? So it's like we must be up. Whenever I explain to clients how much it costs to be up 99.99% of the time, they usually back off. They're like, 95 sounds good. But it's hard to say you're 84% secure now, right? Like it's really hard to say that. Like I've seen there, I was talking to this one person and she's like, yeah, we're not going to onboard any of those new apps into our security tool because then it brought our secure score down from like 95 to like 70. And so we're just not going to put them in the app till they look better because we need to keep because our SLA says 95%. And I'm like, no, you're still insecure, right? Like, yeah.
I mean, this is also, Gary is referencing something that I think is problematic in our industry, right? When we don't always know the best way to quantify this, right? And we have to deal with that ambiguity as practitioners, right? And until there is maybe some absolutely magical framework that comes out that it enables us to quantify our exact cybersecurity risk at this moment, we have to live in that environment, and we have to kind of use our judgment to reduce that risk and our best to like describe it. And again, this is where learning things around threat modeling and risk management help you with that language of describing risks, because it's hard to quantify them. So you might as well qualify them really well, at least sort of that's how I see it. But yeah.
No, I totally agree. Yeah.
I mean, that's another $1 billion idea, right? A bulletproof cybersecurity risk quantifying framework. I don't know.
Well, there's a lot of the frameworks, but it's like, how do you actually get
like automation, right? It just does it for you. Little computer spits out.
Sounds good. I'll take 12.
Yeah.
Okay, I have another question. Let's say you work somewhere and management doesn't think security is that important. How do we get them more involved? Like, how do we get them to be interested? I worked at a place where they're like, Tanya's doing her pesky little pen tests. Tanya's doing her pesky little remediation project. Mm-hmm. And what I did was I wrote up all the risks that they weren't letting me fix. So like no one would listen to me. Everyone's like, go away, Tanya. I don't have time for your crap. I have real work to do. And so I wrote up a report that said, here's the things that could happen to our business as a result of us not fixing this. Here's examples of real life where this has happened here. And I went through like the ones, just like the 5 or 6 that were really scaring me. And I was like, will you sign off that you accept this risk? To the person, the 2 people basically who had the authority. So the chief information officer, and then we had a departmental security officer. So he's above the CISO. He does the physical security as well. He's like in charge of all sorts of things. And I was like, I need you both to sign off that you accept this risk. And they're like, this is crap. I don't accept this. And I was like, well, you not giving me the authority to make people fix these things, like my new t-shirt will say scapegoat on it, because like that's all I can think you're setting me up for, right? Like it's my job to fix it, like to work with teams to fix these things, but no one's fixing them. And so like I don't know what to do. Mm-hmm. So like, can you give me power? And so the one boss, his name was Bill, and he was just this total badass. And he's like, you tell them Bill sent you. And Bill was like 5'6", but like his personality was 7 feet tall. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And he was just like this super intelligent, really ridiculously confident, also happened to be really handsome. Totally unrelated. Everyone had a crush on Bill. But anyway, like everyone. And so I was like, Bill told me that this must be fixed within 30 days. And they're just like, oh my God, Bill sent her. And it was like whoosh, smooth sailing from then on. And I'd only bring very important things to Bill. I'd try never to waste his time, but he became more serious about cybersecurity. And like, that's one way that I've gotten management on board before, like learning that, like basically me learning better communication skills. So they actually would listen
Mm-hmm.
like you've had way more experience with this because you actually like were a CISO for more
CISO.
than
Yeah.
yeah.
CISO. Yeah. I mean,
CISO.
I've seen a lot of people go crazy in this space. Like a lot of security people kind of lose their cool here by like freaking out. Like, why don't you care? I care so much. You care nothing. We are, it really, and there's a lot of lashing out that could happen in that environment. But I think
Mhm.
one of the things that I've learned is that management cares about something, right? They might not care about security, but they care about other things. What do they care about, right? Like trying to figure out, because assuming they're competent managers, they're running a business that is probably successful. They care about keeping that business running. There's always a way to like thread cybersecurity into enabling that business to run. And you can kind of hook them in that way. I'm not saying it's a perfect strategy. I'm saying it's one of many strategies that you can use to like empathize with what it is, because they could just see you as like, oh man, these guys are just going to get in our way and like slow us
Mhm.
down, and we're never going to XYZ. And so, building a relationship with them and empathizing on what it is that they have to do. Like maybe there's like some crazy supply chain they have to work out. And like, that's actually a really hard problem. I've never done that. I have no idea how to do that. Right. And so you as a cybersecurity person should try to empathize with the problems that they're solving, and maybe kind of get to, move over to them rather than getting them to come over to you. I believe that is a consistently winning strategy.
Yeah.
But in government, you could just use bill, right? Because government's a little bit of a different, right? You always have a bill that you can kind of
if
set.
Bill agrees with you,
Yeah. Or if
right?
there is a bill, right? But usually in government, there's always a way to escalate this to, I don't know. You could escalate enough and it'll get done. But
So
yeah, I
Kelly,
don't know.
your answer is fantastic, and I agree. Yeah, like I think you worded it way better than I did. Like, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I hope so. I hope everyone has success with getting management on board. It is a hard problem though, but it's a hill that you should die on, but you should just carefully die on that hill. Right.
Yeah, like slow death.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like don't die for the first vulnerability. Like
Right.
it needs
Yeah.
to be worth it to
Yeah.
stake your claim on it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the next question I feel is an easier question. How do we get developers, like software developers, on board?
Mm-hmm.
I
Well,
think
this one's definitely easier because there's a language that you probably overlap, right? You can speak the same language, right? Whereas maybe management is a little bit of that. But I think you are like really good at this part. So maybe this is like your whole thing. You're so good at this, getting developers to listen.
because I'm one of them. Like
Empathy.
just show them the cool stuff. Like one of my clients just got Sneak, like the whole package, like all the stuff. And this isn't an advertisement for them, but the client, they had requirements. That tool met it the best. And so that's what they got. And I'm like having this meeting showing a bunch of devs, and they're just like, this is awesome. When do we get it? Like, I want my app to be the best. And like, they're like, can we run this ourselves or do we have to wait on you? I'm like, you will have all the power. You will be able to use it anytime you want. All you got to do is push the code into the repo. Like 5-10 minutes later, it's going to tell you stuff. Mm-hmm. And they're just like, yes. And I'm like, and whenever you don't understand something, you just tell me and I'll walk you through anything you want. And they're just like, this is awesome. We used to have to like wait a long time. And that client specifically, they only do releases every couple of weeks, but they push code often. So they don't have to wait for a release anymore. They don't have to run the pipeline. I'm like, we'll tell you every day. If you check in every day, we'll tell you stuff every day. Right. And for them, they're like, this is great. We can't wait. So like showing them cool tech, giving them self-service, like letting them be the boss of the thing and being there for them. So like sometimes they're like, what the hell does this mean? And I'm like, sometimes I know and sometimes I don't know. But you're good at this too. I mean, we used to do workshops together. And
yeah, I mean, yeah, and also like, I think a thing that I've used in the past with developers is like, don't trust the tooling as much as you think. Like I've definitely had tooling kind of spit out these reports and I'm like, Okay. I mean, I get it. Like, null dereferences could be problematic, but is it problematic in this context, right?
Yeah.
And just like not blindly just watching the tool like do its thing and then just regurgitating back, like do the work of figuring out whether this is real risk or not in context,
Mhm.
because that's the
Mhm.
one thing developers are missing that you have that they don't, is context around how serious this thing is or not, right? They
Yeah.
might not know or might not understand like the severity of that. And I think it's your job to set that context for them. And
Yeah.
that's your security job, right? What's the worst thing
Yeah.
that could happen if we don't do this? Yeah.
Yeah, especially stuff that, like, for instance, they're like, oh, this API has this weakness. I'm like, yeah, but we have a gateway in front of it, so that negates that. Or
Yeah.
is this public facing? Oh, it's not. So there's still risk, but there's less risk, right? And like, is the data really sensitive? Is it not? Is this, is that? And like, yeah, giving them a better context of like, could you fix this in like the next couple months? Or could you fix this? Like, do you have time right now? And usually
Mm-hmm.
it's not a right now thing. Usually it's not. Usually it's can we talk about this? Do you have time next week? And being realistic. And sometimes just helping them fix stuff.
Yeah. Or sometimes just letting it go, right? Like maybe you can't
Oh,
fix
yeah.
everything and there's just like, and that's okay, right? And you just kind of, know that that's a thing. And sometimes security's role is just to document that there's a thing and then not fix it. Like
Yeah.
that's also like a thing you could do too. Like, and if you live in that world where you feel like you have to fix everything, you're probably gonna have a very emotionally painful journey, right?
Yeah, you're not going to be a happy security person. You're going to be stressed. You're not going to sleep well. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff where I'm like, nah, just ignore that. It's like
Mm-hmm.
in this context, that just doesn't scare me. It's fine. We'll just like put a little mark in the tool so it stops telling you and bothering you. Don't worry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder if I could teach that to them. But I guess maybe that's a dangerous thing because they'll be like, yeah, we don't have to worry about any of them.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe. I mean, maybe some developers are pretty, there's more security oriented ones that might be able to triage certain types of bugs and
Yeah.
reason. I mean, I think the other thing with developers is accountability, right? Like around like, are they accountable for the app? Like in certain organizations, like they're the ones that'll get like the escalation call, right? If something
Mhm.
goes wrong. And I think that's a good culture, right? When developers are part of the escalation process rather than just SREs or ops people,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
they're more accountable for the code that they ship, right? Like, is it good? Is it bad? Like, how much should I care? Should I try harder? And I think, again, accountability goes a long way in security.
Hmm. Okay, we have 2 questions left, Nikki.
All right.
Where do you start? Where you want to join security? You are like you're a dev and you want to start writing more secure code. I mean, so like in the most biased way I could possibly present this, I think we should start here.
Yeah.
We should buy my book. Um, but where else could someone start? Like
Yeah.
there's
I mean, I guess we've answered this question. There's a million, thousand, billion resources on the internet to start at, right? I think the question is, how do you know which one to pick, right? Like which one do you pick? And I guess I would say that, again, this is my own learning bias, is if I'm starting like a new topic area, it has to be an area that is exciting to me that will help me want to stick with learning it. So if I was
Mhm.
just getting into security and I was learning a really like I was learning how to write policies, I don't know if I'd still be sitting here, right? Like I might have dropped out a long, long time ago, right? So I think maybe trying to find an area that is more exciting to you and just kind of like
Mhm.
blindly take yourself down that road and then see where that leads. Because all these, every time you learn something new, it's going to lead you to a brand new road. It's like you're going to see like 40 forks at the end of that learning journey, and you're going to be like, wow, I now know I've unlocked so much more. And you just kind of keep traversing this big graph of knowledge. So I think finding something that you're really excited about learning. It could be something totally non-related. Like you might be like, all right, I want to understand how memory corruption issues lead to unsafe security realities, right? And you might just want to go down that road, and that's really cool. Do it. Don't think that there's a right or wrong way to do this.
Yeah. Okay, so I have a thing to add because I always do. So every Monday on Twitter, I do this thing called Cyber Mentoring Monday. And so this has been years now, since like 2018, I think I started it. So basically people were like, can you be my mentor? And I was like, no, I already mentor like 2 nice people and that's all I got time for. But then I was like, oh, I don't want to leave them hanging. And so I was like, what if we could match them with other people? And so every Monday on Twitter, I use this hashtag and try to connect people with professional mentors. And like hundreds of people have connected with each other. So like, I don't be like, hey, Alice, meet Bob. I just put it out there and then people connect themselves. They're like, I really want to learn instant response. Like I'm a sysadmin. I've done this, I've done that. Like, and someone's like, hey, I am an instant responder and like this book changed my life, or let's have a virtual coffee and chat. And I feel like finding a professional mentor or like a friend, acquaintance, like a person that can talk to you and make introductions for you and like help you not waste so much time learning tons of random things and instead like help focus you on where you're trying to get. Like my professional mentors, including Nikki, were like really helpful for me and like helping me figure out like where I wanted to go and things I wanted to learn. And like, I'm super stuck and I don't know what to do. I'm going to use my cheat code and call my mentor. But it's true, right?
Yeah, no, it's a great, yeah, I totally agree. Having people who could help you, who have a little bit more experience, and asking them really well thought through questions, right? Not like instead of maybe saying, what do I do next? Say, I have these 3 ideas of what I want to do next. Do you think any one of these are better or worse based on this big outcome that I want to achieve? Kind of using more effort into more effort into the questions you're asking, because sometimes these open-ended questions lead to kind of crappy answers, right? Like,
yeah. And also never ask them something if you haven't asked a search engine first. So never be like, well, how do I do this? And then it's like the second Google result. I'm like, that's not acceptable. Like you shouldn't ask your boss or anyone else something that you could have found in a search engine in like 5 minutes. Like this is something you've already thought about, you've put like good effort into, and now you're going to use, like you only get so many cheat codes. And if you waste them, like your mentor is not going to want to spend more time or effort on you. Like really respecting their time, I have learned, is a way to get better results. Yeah. Okay. So I feel like also join communities that interest you. Like if you're really into forensics, there are forensics communities. If you're really into AppSec, there's OWASP and there's the SheHacksPurple community, which is free. And I'm going to put in the chat. So it's like free for everyone. We don't sell stuff there. We even have oops, and I typed it wrong because I'm awesome. So
whoops.
I spelled my own name wrong. So I'm going to put that there. So
hopefully you own that.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, actually someone took my old domain, SheHacksPurple.dev, and they put up like a really weird blog there where it's like, you don't need to know my name because that's not important. I'm like, why are you putting that? That's weird. There's articles about internet connected sex toys. I'm like, okay. But yeah, like join community, like network, meet people, attend meetups, like someone that people know gets told things or asked things or referred for things, or like, yeah, we are looking for a junior person that does this or does that. Like, oh yeah, I remember Sarah was asking about that at the meetup last month. Like that's how a lot of jobs happen. It's a lot of this person knows that person, or like we worked on this open source project together, and all of those things add up to all of a sudden, hey, maybe we should give them a shot. Okay, we have one question left. Nikki, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Where do you get help? If you are working in AppSec, what happens if you're like, I'm stuck and I don't know the answer?
I think you ask, right? You ask your friends, you ask people that you don't know on Twitter, you ask Stack Overflow, you ask Google, you ask, I think you ask.
Yes.
Or you look it up. Yeah.
Yeah. Look it up first and then ask. Like literally yesterday, I put on Twitter, I was like, so I hate iMessage. I got an iPhone for the first time. I've always been like an Android user, and I got an iPhone because everyone's like, that's awesome. And their cameras are really fancy pants. And I hate iMessage so much with such a passion. Like if someone leaves you a 5-minute message, Nikki, you have to listen to the whole thing. You can't fast forward. You can't stop it partway through. It just like restarts. I'm like, why? Why do you hate me?
Huh.
And so I'm like, I want Signal to be my messaging app. And I was like, I'm like looking it up and it's not working. It's not working. It's not working. And so I was like, I must go to all the smart people I know, my Twitter followers. They're so smart. They know more than me. And so I asked, and everyone's like, you're out of luck. Apple's blocked that on purpose. And I was like, why, Apple? Why? I love Signal. I don't know what to say. It just, I love the way it works. I like everything about it and their politics and all sorts of stuff. But
yeah, I think it. I mean, I can't help you with your iMessage. I guess you could just go back to Android then. I guess.
yeah, but so I asked, right? Like I just was like, I don't know. I've tried finding the answer. Me and my friend Vane last night were like playing around with our phones trying to figure it out because she has Signal and I have Signal. So she's like, I'm going to signal this to you. And then it went to my iMessage. And I was like, oh, it's not cool.
No. But yeah, asking.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think too, when you ask, like sometimes I'm like, is this a dumb question? And then I like try to research more to see if it's a dumb question. And you'll figure out like it's generally not a dumb question. Like if you're struggling with it, probably other people are too. And yeah. So
exactly. Like it's okay.
Or just have confidence in dumb questions. Yeah.
Yeah. And if someone tells you your question's dumb, you just learned that person's a jerk. And you shouldn't ask them again. Like it sounds bad, but I mean, if someone's gonna be rude to you because you don't know, like you don't need to know that person anymore.
Yep.
Unless hopefully they're not a family member. But yeah. Siblings, I have to say I wasn't maybe like the best when I was a sibling and I was like a teenager. I'd be like, never, go ask mom. But generally adults can be like pretty good about this. And even if they don't know, they might be like, oh, sometimes people respond, ooh, I'm following because I don't know the answer to this either. Like I want to see how this works out, right? But yeah, usually my Twitter followers know the answer to literally everything. So I was surprised I stumped them with this. Like someone's like, even if you jailbreak it, it doesn't work. And I was like, damn it. Like that's an intense level of trying to
You must use iMessage.
But yeah, so
what about those emojis that you could send of your face moving around?
Yeah, no, I don't like
Doesn't that make you feel better? Because
no, and it's also like when you go to send an emoji, like the first couple defaults are like these stupid unicorn heads. I'm like, why would this be my default? Why do you think that's how I choose to communicate?
As a unicorn head?
Yeah. Like, no, it gives me like a whole page of them. So I always have to like go past it to like more appropriate emoticons. So I'm in my 40s. So I enjoy using the smiling face with the crying laughter, which apparently identifies my age group. Young people tell me they're like, no one uses that anymore. I'm like, but then how do you tell people you're laughing really hard? I don't understand. Apparently I'm old, Nikki.
I don't know. I guess I must be old because I didn't even know that was a thing.
So, I know it's because I hire
maybe
people.
I have to learn more about social media. Yeah.
But that basically that is the end of the questions. Oh, and Gary's saying, what's wrong with unicorns? Nothing is wrong with unicorns, Gary. But I don't want those to be my default things it thinks I should always use. Like unicorns just aren't for every conversation. They're for special conversations.
It's true. That is true. Everything does not need a unicorn.
So I want to say thank you to Nikki for joining me multiple times on this stream.
Yeah, this has been great. Thank you this is it. You live streamed your whole book over the course of a year.
Yeah. This is it.
I
want to thank every person who keeps showing up to these because Gary, Kellen, we're missing the person that always asks the cheese question, Ben. But like I really appreciate all of you showing up month after month. I really appreciate like people watching this after and taking the time. I really appreciate people reading my book, applying that knowledge and making way more secure applications. Like we're in this together. Like I'm doing this because I literally want to help change our industry. And like Nikki and all the other guests that we've had, like they volunteered for free to share tons of their expertise and knowledge for free because like all of us really, really care about this. And so Kellen has responded with a unicorn, so that's really good. But I want to say thank you to everyone who's like basically given us your attention and your time and like taking the effort to be a part of this. And so I want to say thank you so much. Oh, and the Audible version of my book is great. Thank you, Gary. I recorded my own Audible version of the book and it was really hard. It turns out it's like really hard to make your voice have the exact same pitch the next day, but it was also like super satisfying to like be silly and read my own book because there's parts that are funny. But thank you for everyone. I really appreciate it. Honestly, like when you write a book, you don't even know if anyone's going to buy it. And so the fact that it's a bestseller and people have bought it, like I can't tell you how much this means to me. Truly, I can't explain my gratitude. So thank you so much. Thank you, Nikki. And
yeah, thank you. Thanks for writing a book that we could all reference now as like a way to shortcut yourself into AppSec. So yeah, yes. You filled the gap.
Thank you. Okay, everyone. I hope you have a wonderful day. And hopefully I will see you here again for my next Alice and Bob Learn book, which I don't know when that will be ready. Okay. Bye, everyone.
Good luck, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.